Hey guys, Mr. Happy here, and today I'm going to be doing a recap of my thoughts on the Live Letter 16 that just aired on Monday, July 21st at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, I'm very tired, so I'm going to say this is going to be a short video, but let's be honest, none of my videos are ever short, so let's get right to it. So, they asked about 53 questions I've seen so far, and a lot of them just have to do with current questions and adjustments to what can be done with the content that just came out in patch 2.3. There were a few things that were spoken about for the future, as that was one of the topics for Final Fantasy XIV and Realm Reborn, but we'll get to those when we get to the questions. I'm going to skip over some questions here. If you want to see every official answer to the Q&A, please look in the description below. If I find an unofficial translation on Reddit or something that has some additional information, I'll be sure to include that in the description as well. Now, a lot of their questions were frontlines, hunts, Circus Tower, you know, all stuff that just came out in 2.3. Like, for example, with question 1, when participating in frontlines, you constantly have to redo your PvP actions and traits. Yeah, it's annoying, and they're looking towards fixing it. And then you have questions like, are there any plans to randomize the starting point for each Grand Company in Frontlines? I'm sure there's a lore reason as to why this can't happen, but they said they're going to look into it to see if they can make it happen. I don't think it would change the dynamic of the combat too much because of how the map is built, but it would still be nice to not always start on the same side, add a little bit more interesting, just a little bit more interesting to see how the map evolves when you're doing that. It's not as static of a strategy, I guess, if you're starting in different... Well, no, I take that back. Whatever, let's move on. They asked about PvP gear. Now, they asked this question a lot. There was like 6 different ways they asked this question during the live letter about how morale is pretty much useless, but people like to wear PvP gear. So they're going to make glamour work in PvP in 2.35, or at least in Frontlines, according to this question. They said that morale is not going to be... They're going to try and make it less useless, so I'm assuming it's going to take on the aspects of other stats, or it's going to add something to you, but it just won't be as effective. It won't be overly effective as the PvP stat. It'll just actually do something, it seems. And that question is here plenty of times, so if we see it again, I'm going to skip over it. This question also gets asked a lot. Currently, the daily mark bills are difficult to complete due to the spawn rate of certain fates. While we won't be able to make the fates spawn constantly, we're looking at increasing the spawn rate of fates. They also go over how the rewards aren't enough plenty of times in this live letter, and they said they're looking to make adjustments for the daily and the elite mark bills so that they're actually more useful to do and they're more desirable. As for what they spoke about for the hunt now, I thought there would be a lot more questions on the hunt about how overpowering it is compared to every other aspect of the game. You can get the best gear in the game almost entirely from doing hunts just by getting the sands and oil of time. Sure, you're capped by how much soldiery you can get in a week, and obviously you'll get more gear if you do the binding coils every week, but the fact of the matter is, if you spent enough time getting sands and oils, you could at least get full 110 gear from it, and there's nothing else in this game that even remotely compares to the speed that you can gear up. And I was hoping that there would be some adjustments that would maybe slow this process down other than a cap for the seals. But it seems that they're just going to be looking at making the daily and elite mark bills more interesting for the players who don't play a lot. They also said they're not going to be lowering the cost of the item level 70 stuff, but just increasing the daily and elite mark bills. So moving on. Oh yeah, will you ever add an elite mark higher than S? And they basically said that would be like adding another Odin or Behemoth. So they're just going to have to see exactly what they can do as they reach the expansion. They can explore a variety of things. Now this was interesting. Do you have any plan to expand Frontlines? I always said Frontlines is just the name of the battleground type PvP in this game, and that Cartano Flats was a map. And it seems that they agree that Frontlines itself is a concept, and that they could add different maps. I would like to see things like the Cartano Downs or the Cartano Highlands or Allegan Ruins or something along those lines. There's plenty of map ideas that they could do and plenty of different PvP types that have been implemented in games over the years that they can draw inspirations from. And I think Frontlines is probably the best edition of 2.3 other than the Savage Coil for PvE players. They just still need to do some fine-tuning on PvP, but I'll make that its own standalone video in my opinion. Currently, there are many players that enter the Circus Tower to get an unidentified... This is about wasted drops, and this is a problem. There are so many wasted drops at Circus Tower because people just want the drops off of Zonde, the last boss. The Tombstone for the weapon upgrades, which are awesome, and the oil for going up from accessories to item level 110. Don't get me wrong, I know people who roll on the armor pieces, but those are, without a doubt, the most sought-after pieces. So it's unfortunate they don't have any plans to separate the lockouts for the two. I think that would do the Circus Tower a lot of good. Excuse me. Please implement content for the front lines that allow us to compete for standings. This is another thing with PvP that I'll make my own video about, but it looks like they're looking at adding a lodestone feature that will allow you to compare the success of the Grand Companies, which is great. I think when you have factions, you need to have that kind of information trackable. How much of each Grand, how many wins are each Grand Company getting, first, second, and third, and you can sort of give that information to the community, and they can use it however they will. They also mentioned they were going to do a real-life PvP event in Gamescom, which I totally misinterpreted as them just getting 72 people to run at each other in the lobby, but whatever. So, is there any way you can make the Circus Tower similar to Frontlines where you're able to enter the instance without every single player having to select commence? I'm personally not for it, and it seems like they are like, this was more just implemented for Frontlines. They can look into it after they allow you to queue as an alliance, which is good that they're prioritizing that and not this, because that's something that we've been promised for about 7 months now. Moving on to page 2. Again, if I see a question that I don't want to answer because it's been answered before, I'm going to skip over it. Please make it so equipment drops more in Instance Dungeons. I couldn't agree more. Sick of getting Minium. Do you plan on adding another stat for PvP? That's that before. I like this one. They said that we're going to see the Kraken again soon from Hullbreaker Isle, and I didn't expect to see him at all ever again unless it was Hullbreaker Hard Mode. So I'm looking forward to that. I don't exactly know how it's going to work, but please look forward to it. Hi. It's possible to lower the cost of equipment that we can purchase. I went over this before already. This was tapestry art behind them, was just a picture of Frontlines. It was just something they had up while they were actually doing the live letter. We'll be adding ways to obtain allied seals in the future. They said since it was just implemented, not really, but maybe in the future. Just more hunts. I don't see why there really needs to be more ways to get allied seals, but I'm sure they can make it work. Please increase the maximum number of participants in Frontlines. This goes back to them just wanting to implement more maps because just more than 72 people. 72 people is already a lot, and I don't think it's necessary for it to go any higher. I would like to see smaller maps, to be honest, 20 people, 30 people, things along those lines. Of course, they would have to be multiples of 8, but I would like to see smaller maps on top of Frontlines because not everybody likes running around that giant map and taking 3 minutes to get anywhere. Will they be adding more to Edda's story? We'll see. That's basically all they said. It depends on feedback. Currently, elite marks die instantly, and they're looking towards making adjustments other than raising the HP. I'm interested to see if that's the infamous allied seal cap that people have been expecting would be implemented sooner or later. Be implementing more riddle-solving quests. I think they've been doing this at a good rate. We got sightseeing logs in, what, 2.28, and we got Winebod's riddles in 2.3. I'd like to see more riddle quests. As somebody who likes to challenge my mind, I actually haven't gotten to do my Winebod's riddles yet, and I'm not going to be making a guide for anything like that, because, I don't know, kind of takes away from it. There's not really much of a completionist need to have this done. This is really one of those things that are just for people to test their brain and their knowledge of the game, and I really like that. Are there any plans to implement additional costumes? I actually want to speak about this really quickly. He says while they can't say much, they will be adding something in the future for completing a certain piece of content. I think we're going to be able to get Kefka's gear. I don't think we're going to fight him. I don't think anything along those lines. But I do think that Kefka's outfit, if you don't know who he is, I'll put him on the screen right now. I think that that will make an appearance because during the live stream, he kept saying Kefka, Kefka, Kefka. And it was without a doubt, they're speaking about the Final Fantasy VI character. They could have just been using him as an example. I don't know if they're necessarily saying, yes, you will get Kefka's armor, but I'm waiting for an unofficial live translation to see what this was actually said about this. So hopefully we'll see that soon. Again, the rewards for mark bills and elite mark bills low. That's something I mentioned already. Plans to add mechanics to elite marks. They said they don't want people dying if they're not participating. But if you're nearby and you're not participating and you're just nearby, then you're probably going to die anyway. So I don't really see why this should hold them back just because they don't have a specific battlefield for it. Are there any plans to implement a Savage mode for the original Binding Coil Bahamut? That's actually good. They spoke about separating normal and Savage second coil finally, which is good because I'd like to be able to clear a normal coil and then go into Savage coil for the week just to make sure I can get my gear and we don't end up Monday night going, well, we don't have the time to do the raid this week, so we get no loot because, you know, there's problems, there's pros and cons with it, but I would like to see that. And I would also like to see a Savage first coil, and they said if they do it, they would implement it about the same time as they separate Savage and normal second coil. So I'm hoping to see Savage turn 2 and 5. I mean, Savage turn 5 especially. I would like to see them completely remake the Twin Tanya fight with the knowledge and the experience they've now gained with almost a year of developing content for the game. Can you give us an update on the armor weapon guide? This is actually something that they said that you would be able to learn about the history of your armors and weapons, and they said they're still working on it, exactly how the system's going to work. It's going to be more of a collect, or if it's just going to be the lore. We'll see it we'll see more information about it in the future, hopefully sometime soon. Now, this was another interesting one. Will the story for the Crystal Tower end in the next update? And they actually went out and said the story for the Coil Bahamut will end in 2.4. Crystal Tower will end in 2.5. So we got to be coming near expansion time. 2.5 will probably be out by January or February of next year. And I'm expecting that there will be a 2.6. and that around August or September of 2015, we would be seeing an expansion. That's been my guess for a while now because it follows the 2-year plan, which we'll go over a little bit more now. A little bit more later into the letter, but that's good because I feel like they're at points that could be using some wrapping up. Previously, Yoshi-P mentioned it'd be interesting to go to the moon, but do you have any information about Alliance-based instant raid coming after the Crystal Tower? And he said we won't be going to the moon, but they actually have something completely original, which is good because I think that it's great that you did the Crystal Tower. It's a great homage. I played Final Fantasy III recently, and I loved it, and I love seeing all the homages to it in the Crystal Tower, but I would like to see something original too. I'd like to see that they're not just one-trick ponies of taking everything from previous Final Fantasy games and throwing it into Final Fantasy XIV. It's nice, but I do like to see some originality. Is there any progress on the update list you mentioned on the previous letter from the producer live? I'd like to see this too. Let us know exactly what's going on with the updates and a roadmap for the future. But again, that's pretty hard to do, and they said that due to the preparations for the expansion, it hasn't been hard. But they apologizes, or it hasn't been easy. Previous live letter, he mentions about increasing the magic defense for Dragoons. Yeah, I never understood why Dragoons had less magic defense, but it seems that they're just trying to balance it out right now, and when they have a solid answer, how much they'll increase the magic defense, we'll find out. So after that, they had the guy, they had a guest, Komodo, as he'll be called on all these questions. A lot of these things I won't actually go into too much because they're more personal questions about him. I'll try and skip over those. If you're interested in them, you can of course read the official Q&A that I've included in the link below. Komodo, did you bring anything from your mother to Kai for show and tell? He actually showed off a video in Ninja, which is really cool. I'm hoping to see it uploaded on the official channel later. It showed off about 10 different combinations of Mudras. It also showed off the stealth aspect and how it'll look and how it'll work. And honestly, it all looked really cool. The Mudras look like they don't take that long to use, like less than a global cooldown or the equivalent of a global cooldown to perform a set of Mudras. The only one that seemed a little bit longer was when they had to do 3 Mudras back to back. And even that, I'm just assuming that the effect will make up for the fact that it takes a little bit longer to cast. I'm looking forward to it, and it looks like it's going to be some fast-paced fun for ninjas. All right, moving to the next page. We're more than halfway through, by the way. I don't know how many questions are total. 58 it'll look like, unless there's a conclusion at the end. So will you ever be making a song out of Tataru's song? That's something for lore people. What is Komodo in charge of? He oversees everything instead of being in charge about something specific. Again, questions about what he does personally, I'm going to try and skip over. Will he be introducing content in the future similar to Guru Venegas from Stone Vigil? We have to decide what attacks to use based on a monster's behavior. And he said, yes, we'll see more things like that, but some more content with random elements as well. In patch 2.4, you'll be adding a new class, Rogue Ninja. Are you planning to make all future full party content 1 tank, 5 DPS, and 2 healers? He said no. The Binding Coil of Bahamut will still be 2 tank, 2 healer, and 4 DPS. And they said they put a lot of extra work into it. I'm hoping that means there's more than 4 bosses in the last coil of Bahamut. Because I get it. It's a lot of work to do bosses when you're trying to make them elaborate and whatnot, but I feel that even with their coil every 6-month schedule, that they could definitely pump out more than 4 bosses. Even if they are going to do 2 difficulties eventually with Savage, I feel that they could definitely pump out at least 6 bosses for the 3rd coil Bahamut, and I would definitely appreciate that. In a previous interview, you mentioned that you were aiming to make this an MMO that lasts for 10 years. So how far ahead have you planned? This was interesting. They said they've started planning patch 4.0, which is, by the way, 2 expansions from now. 3.0 is the first expansion after A Realm Reborn, 4.0 being the second. So they said they've already started planning about 4 years in advance. That's pretty crazy. I mean, I get that the success of the game is going very, very well for them, that Square Enix is extremely pleased with how well the game is doing and far exceeds their expectations, and it's actually turning them into a profitable company after many, many years. But to plan 4 years in advance, that's pretty ballsy. I gotta say that. I'm interested to see how the game evolves and how they continue to develop content and really turn this into a theme park MMO. Theme park MMO is something that I'll talk about in another video as well. It's a concept that I have a lot of opinions about. Komodo, are there any instances where you're able to use your previous experience? He says in he worked for Final Fantasy XI. Don't use that many. Don't use that much of your previous knowledge, please. Then Komodo, if you play Final Fantasy XI, please don't use that much of your previous knowledge in MMOs. What's his favorite food? Ramen. I like ramen. Komodo, when development began, what was something you felt you wanted to fix? He said you just wanted to focus on remaking it from scratch. Games that were a major influence on him. Will you make it possible to place a planter in our personal chambers or garden? They said that they were actually thinking about making it possible to garden from pots in the future, garden pots that you could put in your personal chambers. And I've actually thought that would be a great thing. That's something that was in Final Fantasy XI that I wish was in Final Fantasy XIV. They said that they have to work on it a little bit first, a little bit more of the gardening from the fields, but they'll let us know in the future if they can implement it later. Moving on to question 40. Are you able to garden in our personal house? That is currently our plan. Thank you for the very matter-of-fact answer. Logging out in our private chambers and logging back in placed outside of the house. People just want that to be fixed. And they said they'll look into it a little bit in the future. They'll see. And are denny material only obtainable through desynthesis? Yes. Question 43. Are there any plans to add more horror stories? I think they just need to add more stories, period, to the hard mode dungeons. It's not just, yeah, there's some bad things happening here, we need to go back. I think they did an okay job with that with Stone Vigil and a great job with the other 2 dungeons. So I'm glad to see that they're actually working on making the stories more involved in the hard mode dungeons. Please add more Disciple of Hand-specific equipment so we can increase the synthesis skill more efficiently. I actually never thought about that. And they said they'd like to do that. They're actually thinking of being able to increase your desynthesis skill with equipment and food, which means a new stat for Disciples of Hand. That could be great. In my opinion, that is actually really cool to read. I never thought they would do something like that. I feel the cost and difficulty for cleaning the stables and gardening the vegetables to feed for chocobos is rather high. And they agree. They actually are changing the recipe for the broom for cleaning your chocobo stables. So if you have been crafting them like crazy, I apologize, but you may want to only craft them if necessary right now until they change the recipe to make it cheaper. As for the chocobos, they look like they're not going to change that too much, as people are still trying to figure out how to properly garden for those items. Currently, we're unable to desynthesize item level 95 items. In the future, we will be able to do that just as the item level increase continues for the game. Komodo, when designing content, how do you decide to set the difficulty and judge the rate at which players will clear it? That's actually a really interesting question that I am going to read on my own time, but again, something that I don't want to go over right now. If you're interested in it, definitely check out this forum, though. They plan to implement a new role, such as buffer or debuffer. I'm glad that they keep getting this question and they keep acknowledging this question. We'll be sticking to our existing roles for a while, which is pretty upsetting for those of us who remember when they mentioned hybrid jobs. I think about 9 months ago they mentioned hybrid jobs. It's mainly because the matching process is faster and it'll be easier to understand for new players. We are not completely ruling this out. We are currently putting an emphasis on making the game easy to understand for new players that may start playing the game for patch 3.0. I feel like if you're going to say that for 3.0, then you're going to say it for 4.0, you're going to say it for 5.0. So I'm not holding my breath for a buffer or debuffer. Just me. I don't personally think it's a good idea in an active game like this to just have somebody occasionally casting a spell on your enemy or occasionally casting a spell on your allies. Occasionally meaning like once every 10 seconds, because buffers and debuffers are known to do that in the past unless you really give them all the tools necessary, like a red mage in Final Fantasy XI being able to heal, enfeeble, or deal damage, I say laughably, unless they're soloing things. During the 15th letter from the producer live, you mentioned you were intrigued in the game Evolved at E3. Now, I actually thought this was really cool, excuse me for that. Are there any plans to implement something similar to this game style 4 versus 1? They said that since that game style consists of 4 players versus a player-controlled monster, they would have to work on some user interface. But they said they're actually looking to maybe implement something like this, which I think would be cool. Imagine if there was a dungeon you could go to, a hard mode dungeon, where the boss is controlled by a player. A player can elect to just be in a queue to control the boss for that. Think of it like Dark Souls, Demon Souls, my bad. Demon Souls, that boss where occasionally you get sucked into a world and you become the boss. Something like that would be really cool. So I am looking forward to seeing how this all plays out. And we're on to the last page. There's been a few more questions that I haven't seen answered yet, so hopefully this is all of them, though. Are there any instances where players' reactions were different? That's another more personal question. Do you have any updates on the Eternal Bond system? It's currently planned for 2.4, or one of the sub-patches of 2.4. The Eternal Bond is the marriage system, by the way. So, in case you were wondering, marriage 2.4 or shortly after 2.4. I'd like to place an armoire and an unending journey inside my personal room, and they said they're planning to make it possible in 2.4. Be implementing furnishing to let us store equipment or racks we can decorate with equipment. The racks, they said they are not currently thinking about, which is, again, disappointing considering they said that they were considering it a while ago. Sorry if you hear my nephew crying. We understand that requests for this have for increasing the space of company chests, but we give too much memory space to private chambers, so it would become difficult to increase the availability of land. So please look forward to it. They're going to look into it. Hi. Magic stable brooms are too costly. Yeah, they said they're going to be fixing the recipe for this. Also, we are considering selling them in NPC shops so that players do not sell them at higher than that price. So you can craft them for cheaper, I guess, but there is an NPC that you can just buy them if you can't craft them. So we'll just have to see how it's going to work. The vegetables for chocobo raising can only be obtained through gardening. Do you have any plans to adjustment for that? They said no. They said that they'll keep an eye on it, but right now they don't have any plans. I'd like to be able to obtain the new crafting tools that are implemented in 2.3 without having to desynthesize. We currently do not have any plans to do so. However, we may consider other ways to obtain the tools in the future. A lot of these are going to be this in the end. An extended version of Slumber Disturbed was playing in the Tamtar Deepcroft Hard. Are there any plans to introduce extended versions of the song in the future? Yes, they do have plans for this. And the final question, please make it so that there will be differences in how you can raise a chocobo when combining different vegetables to feed your chocobo. Currently, we are not looking... It seems like all these last page questions are like, we're not thinking about that, but we'll look into it in the future. It's possible for anyone from your free company to feed your chocobo. There could be a possibility where someone feeds your chocobo the wrong kind of food. They would have to set a priority system so you wouldn't allow other people to take care of your chocobo. Considering our direction for chocobo raising, we want to make it possible to take care of each other's chocobo, and that is how we made the current system. And that is everything. So there were a total of 58 questions, which is a lot more. I really like this live letter because it was more the classic format. Just it felt like they were just answering questions and they didn't have too tight of an agenda. At the end, they did actually go into some reveals, which I'll be mentioning more in depth in a video, like a free trial and recruit a friend feature, which two features I think every MMO absolutely needs to have if they want to, you know, continue to stay profitable and grow and expand and things like that. On top of that, they mentioned a 1-year anniversary event, the return of the fates from the previous 3 collaboration events, Dragon Quest X, Final Fantasy XI, and Final Fantasy XIII, so I guess I'll have to reshare those videos. I never thought people would end up having to use them again. They mentioned the opening of an Eorzean cafe in Japan. They mentioned that they're going to be at Gamescom from August 13th to August 17th or 18th, I can't remember, and then on TGS they're going to have a 14-hour broadcast for the 1-year anniversary. I think they said they were doing that at TGS. It's either that or it's Gamescom, because technically the 1-year anniversary is August 27th. So it's either going to be before at Gamescom or after at TGS. I'm assuming there will be a live letter at each of these events, so please look forward to it. Hi. And on top of all of that, we're going to be getting a lot more information in the next coming months about the expansion. So I'm really looking forward to seeing more about the Gold Saucer as well, more about personal housing, which has been spoken about many times leading up to now, and just in general looking forward to a lot of the efforts they're going to be putting in towards the end of the summer and the beginning of the fall season. So hopefully you guys will stay subscribed to my channel, like, favorite, subscribe, and share if you're looking forward to all the updates about that information as it becomes available. Be sure to follow me on Facebook and Twitter, where I post additional updates about those things, and you can follow me on Twitch, where I do live stream. Hopefully I'll be able to live stream Destiny a little bit later in the week, because right now it's down for maintenance, but I've been loving the hell out of that game. But anyway guys, thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.